Have you ever prayed with tears in your eyes, begging God for a breakthrough, only to be met with silence? You pour your heart out, you light the candles, you whisper the words, you shout to heaven, and yet nothing changes. It's one of the most painful experiences a human can face, to feel ignored by the very source you believe created you, and maybe you've been told it's your fault. You didn't pray enough. You don't have enough faith. You're not worthy. But deep down, you know that's not the truth, because you have prayed with everything you've got. And if prayer is supposed to move mountains, why do so many mountains refuse to move? The paradox cuts deep. The scriptures say, "Ask, and you shall receive." But the same scriptures also say, "You ask and do not receive because you ask wrongly." So which is it? Is prayer broken, or is there something about it we were never taught? And here's where the hook digs in. The problem is not God. The problem is not you. The problem is resistance. Resistance rooted in ignorance of how the universe actually works. And until you understand the laws that govern body, mind, and spirit, you will keep asking and asking and asking, and the silence will keep echoing back. Understanding the laws of the universe and the divine spark. So let's get straight to the heart of it. When prayers go unanswered, most people assume one of two things. Either God is ignoring them, or they themselves are unworthy. But here's the truth. Neither of those are correct. The silence is not rejection. The silence is reflection. It's a mirror of how we are asking. Why prayers fail. Think about it this way. If you throw seeds on cement, nothing grows. Is it because the seed is bad? No. Is it because the earth is bad? No. It's because you didn't understand the law of planting. Prayer works the same way. It isn't magic, it's alignment. And alignment means obeying the laws that govern the universe. Laws just as real as gravity, only hidden from plain sight. You don't receive because you ask against the very laws that make receiving possible. It's like trying to fly a plane without understanding aerodynamics. The engine roars, the fuel burns, but the plane never leaves the ground. Not because the engine is weak, but because you ignored the law of lift. The forgotten key, the divine spark. Here's what no one tells you. Inside every single human being lives a spark, a direct fragment of the divine. Call it the spirit, the soul, the centelha divina. It doesn't matter the word. That spark is the blueprint of who you are meant to become. It's the compass that never points wrong. It's the part of you that knows the path even when your mind doubts it. But here's the tragedy. Most people spend their whole lives ignoring it. They drown it out with ego, with fear, with inherited beliefs about a God who punishes, judges, and withholds. And then they wonder why their prayers bounce back like echoes in an empty cave. The spark is the receiver. If you don't tune into it, the signal of your prayer never aligns with the field. Prayers without alignment. Picture this. A desperate man prays for money. But inside his heart is filled with fear, with doubt, with the belief that money is evil or that he is cursed. The words ask for abundance, but the vibration screams lack. Which one do you think the universe listens to? Words without alignment are noise. Noise is not prayer. That's why Jesus said, "When you pray, believe that you have received it and it will be yours." Believe, not as in hope, but as in embody. To pray with the spark means to fuse thought and feeling until they vibrate as one. The law of resonance science already hints at this. Two strings tuned to the same frequency vibrate together, even if one is silent. Strike one, and the other sings. Prayer works by the same law. If your inner frequency matches the thing you ask for, reality resonates and delivers. If it doesn't, nothing happens. The spark inside you is already tuned to the frequency of God. But the ego distorts the signal. When you bypass the ego and connect with the spark, the resonance becomes pure. Your prayer stops being begging and becomes being. The American struggle. Let's ground this in real life. How many Americans pray every night for financial relief, but keep swiping credit cards, believing credit equals wealth? They don't understand the law of money. Credit is not money, it's debt. How many pray for health while ignoring the laws of the body, nutrition, rest, balance, and then wonder why sickness persists? How many pray for love while holding bitterness, resentment, and self-hatred in their hearts? The spark inside them whispers the truth daily. Change your habits, change your thoughts, release your anger, align your choices. But they drown it out with ego, with noise, with excuses. And then they call the silence of unanswered prayer a punishment. It's not punishment. It's reflection, from ego to fusion. So what's the first step to answered prayer? It's not more words. It's not louder words. It's not even more faith in the traditional sense. It's fusion. Letting go of ego long enough to feel the spark. When you pray from ego, you're trying to twist God into your will. When you pray from spark, you align your will to God's. And in that alignment, there is no resistance. This is why the mystics say, when the ego dies, prayer becomes effortless. It stops being request and becomes resonance, the laws in motion. Here's the beautiful part. Once you understand this, the universe no longer feels cruel. It feels consistent. Gravity doesn't punish you when you fall off a ladder. It just obeys its law. In the same way, unanswered prayer isn't God punishing you. It's the law reflecting your misalignment. And once you align, once your thought, emotion, and spark vibrate together, answered prayer becomes inevitable. The shift. I once knew a woman who prayed endlessly for peace. She begged, she cried, she fasted. Nothing changed. Until one day, exhausted, she sat in silence. For the first time, she stopped talking at God and started listening within. And there it was, the spark. It told her what to release, what to forgive, what to embrace. She obeyed, not out of fear, but out of love. And within weeks, her life began to shift. Not because God suddenly paid attention, but because she finally aligned with the frequency that had been there all along. The transition to the bigger problem. But here's where most people stop. They begin to understand the spark. They align for a moment and suddenly things shift, opportunities open, peace arrives, prayers get answered. But then something else happens. They hit a deeper problem, because alignment with the spark is only the beginning. The bigger obstacle isn't unanswered prayer, it's distorted prayer, prayer shaped by a distorted image of God. And until that distortion is faced, even the spark cannot shine fully. That's the bigger problem we need to face next. The bigger problem, the distorted masks of God. So you've begun to understand the spark. You've glimpsed the truth that prayer is not begging, but aligning. And maybe you've even tasted a breakthrough or two when your heart and mind synced with the divine. But then something strange happens. Your prayer still feels heavy. Your faith still feels fragile, and doubt still creeps in at night, whispering, what if God doesn't care? What if God is angry? What if I am being punished? This is the deeper resistance. This is the problem beneath the problem. It's not that you don't believe in God, it's that you believe in the wrong version of Him. The inherited God of fear. Let's be honest, most of us grew up with an image of God that was terrifying. A God who punishes disobedience, a God who tests you by taking away what you love, a God who sends sickness, calamities, and eternal torment just to prove a point. In other words, a cosmic tyrant. And if that's the God you carry in your subconscious, how could your prayers ever flow freely? Because here's the paradox, you cannot open your heart fully to someone you secretly fear. And prayer without an open heart is empty. The masks of the divine, Joseph Campbell called it the masks of God. Throughout history, civilizations have projected their fears, their politics, their hunger for power onto the divine. And so we ended up with gods who were jealous, vengeful, bloodthirsty, obsessed with control. But those were never the true face of God. They were masks, human inventions dressed up as divinity. And here's the danger: most people never remove the mask. They spend their whole lives praying to a distorted projection and then wonder why those prayers feel unanswered. It's not that God ignored them, it's that fear blocked the signal, the contrast of love. Now compare that distorted God to the true essence of the divine. The real source is not obsessed with power. The real source is not keeping score. The real source is not dangling heaven and hell like a carrot and a stick. The real source is love. Pure, radiant, unconditional love. A love that gives endlessly. A love that cannot be outdone in generosity. A love that expands you, nurtures you, transforms you. When you fuse with that love, the entire paradigm shifts. Prayer is no longer a transaction. It becomes communion, the psychology of fear-based faith. But let's talk psychology for a moment. If deep down you believe God is harsh, your prayers will always carry the vibration of fear. And fear cancels faith. Fear chokes resonance. Fear sabotages the very alignment we spoke about in the last block. Think about a child asking a parent for help. If the child believes the parent is cruel, every request is laced with anxiety. But if the child knows the parent is kind, every request flows naturally. The outcome changes not because the parent changed, but because the perception did. The same is true of God. The American mirror. In America today, you see this everywhere. People kneel at night, begging a God they secretly believe is angry with them. They pray for blessings, but deep down, they expect punishment. They ask for love, but subconsciously feel unworthy. They ask for healing, but imagine God as the one who sent the sickness. And so the cycle repeats. Distorted image, distorted prayer, distorted results. This isn't atheism. This is worshipping a mask, the historical weight. And we can't ignore the historical weight of this distortion. For centuries, religions wielded fear to control the masses. Follow blindly, or burn eternally. Obey, or be cursed. Sacrifice, or suffer. These images became ingrained in the human psyche. Even when people leave organized religion, the subconscious imprint of a punishing God remains. And as long as that imprint is there, prayer will always carry static. The spark cannot shine through the fog of fear. The tragedy of distorted prayer. This is the tragedy. People cry out, and they are heard. But their own distortion scrambles the signal. It's like trying to tune a radio station through static. The music is there, but the interference drowns it out. That interference is the mask. And until you drop the mask, you will keep mistaking silence for absence. The leap beyond masks. So here's the bigger problem in one sentence. Even when you learn to align with the spark, if your concept of God is distorted, your alignment will always collapse. Because you cannot fully merge with love if you still believe love is punishment. You cannot sustain resonance with the source if you still think the source is keeping score. The key to prayer is not just technique, it's vision. It's knowing who you are praying to, the transition to the final solution. And here's where everything comes together. Because once you see past the masks, once you realize that the true face of God is not wrath, but love, you are ready for the ultimate step. The step is not just to align with the spark for a moment. The step is to fuse with it completely, to let love replace ego, to let communion replace transaction, to let prayer become constant resonance. That's the definitive solution. And when you reach it, unanswered prayer no longer exists. Because you no longer ask, you become the answer. And that's where we go next. The definitive solution, fusion with the spark, prayer as constant love. So here we are. We've walked through the silence of unanswered prayer. We've peeled back the masks of distorted gods. We've discovered that the spark of the divine is inside each of us, waiting, whispering, guiding. But what now? What is the final step, the decisive breakthrough, the solution that ends the cycle of unanswered prayer forever? It is this: fusion, not temporary alignment, not momentary inspiration, but total, lasting fusion with the divine spark within you. What fusion really means. When most people hear fusion with God, they imagine a mystical moment far beyond their reach, a vision in the clouds, an out-of-body miracle, something reserved for saints, prophets, or the chosen few. But here's the truth. Fusion is not far away. It's not reserved for special people. It's available now, because the spark is already in you. Fusion is simply this: living from the spark instead of the ego. Not once, not twice, not just when you're desperate, but continuously. When that happens, prayer no longer feels like sending requests up to a silent sky. It becomes a constant flow of resonance with love itself. The death of ego, the birth of communion. Let's be brutally honest. The biggest barrier between you and answered prayer is not distance from God. It's the ego. The ego wants control. The ego wants to bargain with God. The ego says, "If you do this for me, I will do this for you." But love doesn't bargain. Love gives. When the ego finally dissolves, prayer transforms. It stops being a negotiation and becomes communion. It stops being begging and becomes being. You no longer pray in the old sense, because your whole life becomes prayer. Every thought, every breath, every choice radiates from the spark. And in that state, unanswered prayer no longer exists, because you no longer ask as someone separate. You live as one with the answer. The practical shift. So how does this fusion actually look in everyday life? It looks like this. When you think with love. The spark is not judgmental. It does not obsess over fear or punishment. It guides your thoughts to solutions, not problems. When you feel with love. You stop pouring bitterness into the field. Instead, you radiate forgiveness, gratitude, compassion. When you act with love. Your choices reflect your highest alignment. Even small actions, how you speak to a stranger, how you treat your body, how you spend your money, carry resonance, and slowly, almost invisibly, life shifts. Because prayer is no longer a separate activity. It is who you are. The endless generosity of love. The book you mentioned said it perfectly. The love of God is incessant. It works all the time. It radiates all the time. Think about that for a moment. Divine love never stops giving, never stops radiating, never stops creating. And when you fuse with that love, you too cannot help but give. You too cannot help but radiate. You too cannot help but create. That's why those who live in fusion often seem almost otherworldly. They no longer chase blessings. Blessings chase them. They no longer cry out for miracles. They become the miracle. The paradox of nothingness. Here's the paradox that terrifies the ego, but liberates the soul. When fusion happens, you disappear. Not physically, but spiritually. The you that was afraid, desperate, begging, insecure, vanishes. The ego dissolves, and what remains is pure communion. It feels like nothingness because the old self no longer exists. But in that nothingness, you realize you have everything. Because when you live as love, lack does not exist, fear does not exist, separation does not exist. The butterfly paradigm. It's like the caterpillar. The moment it enters the cocoon, it dissolves. If you looked inside, you wouldn't see a caterpillar growing wings. You'd see a soup of formless cells. To the caterpillar, it feels like death, but to the butterfly, it's the only path to flight. Fusion is the same. Your ego dissolves, your old self melts away. And what emerges is something that doesn't beg God for wings, because it already flies. Why, this is the definitive solution. At this point, you might ask, why is this the final solution? Why not just keep praying harder, longer, more often? Because until you fuse, prayer will always be limited. You will always be an asker, and askers live in separation. Fusion ends the separation. It shifts you from asking to embodying, from hoping to knowing, from waiting to living. That's why saints and mystics across every tradition glowed with peace, even in suffering. They had discovered the secret. When you live as love, you no longer need to beg for answers. You become the answer. The invitation. So here is the invitation, right here, right now. Stop thinking of prayer as something you do. Start seeing prayer as something you are. The spark inside you has never been silent. It has been whispering, radiating, guiding from the beginning. All you have to do is fuse with it. Surrender the ego. Live as love. And when you do, unanswered prayer ceases to exist, because the line between you and God disappears. The transition to closing. And this is the climax of the journey. We began with unanswered prayers, with silence that felt like rejection. We uncovered the truth that the problem was never God, but resistance. We dismantled the masks of distorted gods that bred fear instead of faith. And now we've arrived at the final solution: fusion with the spark, where prayer stops being words sent upward and becomes love radiating outward, where you stop asking for blessings because you realize you are already living in the source of blessing itself. And from that place, the only thing left is the invitation to step into it, to embody it, to live it. A seed never complains when the soil presses down on it. It breaks, and in breaking, it becomes life. A star doesn't curse the darkness before it explodes. It collapses, and in collapsing, it gives birth to new worlds. And you, every unanswered prayer, every silence, every moment of doubt, was never rejection. It was the soil. It was the collapse. It was the breaking point that prepared you for fusion. Because in the end, you were never ignored. You were being transformed. If this message resonated with you, don't let it pass like just another video. This is your moment to act, not with more words, not with desperate asking, but with alignment. Hit like as your declaration, I choose fusion, not fear. Leave a comment and write, I am the prayer, I am the answer. Because when you declare it publicly, you anchor it deeper into your soul. And subscribe with the bell on, not just to follow content, but to stay immersed in a field of resonance where love, not ego, becomes your default. These simple actions are not about algorithms. They're about embodiment. Every click is a signal you send, not to me, but to yourself and to the universe, that you are done begging and ready to live as love. So take the step, align now, and watch how fast the silence turns into songs of answered prayers.